non-trivial sum of money that if you looked at the selectivity of the college, how expensive the college was, the more expensive the college, the more likely they were to vote for Mamdani. You know, the state schools and others, I don't think those people were nearly as enthusiastic. And you see that pattern all throughout the higher education system, that the more expensive the college, the more likely you are to see encampments and protests and locking themselves in the president's office and agitating. And those are the schools. I mean, they select for that type of person. You know, the Ivy League schools have their choice for, you know, they have thousands of applicants who have perfect SAT scores, and that's what that's not what they're optimizing for. They're optimizing for revolutionaries. This was made explicit, I think, in 2020 or 2021. Yale, one of their admissions staff, openly stated that we are selecting for students who are, you know, want to revamp society, want to change everything, have this forward-thinking vision. You know, this kind of coded language, but essentially they were selecting for people who were on the far left.
You know, you guys know about the Ivies more than I would. You guys are both Ivy Leagues, right?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Regrettably.
Whatever.
You guys are part of the problem. I want you to know that.
It does seem interesting, though, that it's almost like it's. I think of how in Mexico, you know, the PR party of like institutional revolution or like perpetual revolution, that to define sort of a certain class of American society, the elite educated part, as you definitionally have to sort of want to tear down or radically change society. And it just strikes me as something that could be really destructive over time if, you know, okay, well, we did the easy things to tear down. What are the harder things to tear down now? Yeah. And I think of that with Mamdani, where he wants to close Rikers and mess up the New York's public schools. There's a lot of damage he can do to that city.
Right. Instead of just being a good steward, right? Like being, like, I mean, that's, you know, ideally, you would want your elites and aspirational elites to be good stewards for the city, the country that they're governing. And instead, it's, well, let me find all the flaws and then introduce all these policies that have historically always failed.
All right. So this has been, I mean, I think the luxury reliefs piece plays into this beautifully. So I'm so glad you're here. But there's also this concept of a dark triad that we should talk about. We welcome back radio in about 5 seconds. I want to get into what that is, and maybe it has a role to play here in what we're seeing. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. National radio, stations across the country. Go for it, Blake.
All right, okay.
We're talking about Dark Triad.
Yeah,
here.
So we were saying, you know, this is a mask-off moment, but actually, what if the mask is on? How much can we... how genuine is Zohran Mamdani, and are there some of these psychological concepts we've talked about? To me, he strikes me as a fundamentally sort of phony person. Like he's adopted.
I think he's a con man.
He's adopted this ideology because it is sort of the uniform of being this, you know, Ivy League immigrant type person that he is. But
well, I think he's embarrassed by that. I think he's trying to front like he's part of, you know, the working poor that he says he's the champion of. But I'm sorry, and I want you to explain what Dark Triad is. But you do not code switch. You do not accent switch. Like Zohran Mamdani does. And but if you haven't seen the videos, you got to go find Mamdani switching accents constantly. He will be anything to anybody if he thinks he can get ahead. I mean, that's pure narcissism and manipulation. But explain what the Dark Triad is, and what do you see in Mamdani?
Yeah. Well, so last night in Mamdani's victory speech, the first words out of his mouth, he quoted the American socialist Eugene Debs. You know, he was an early 20th century socialist. And so, you know, it's sort of mask off and mask on, right? Like he's not going to moderate. He is openly quoting socialists. You know, you go back through his Twitter feed and he quotes people like Marx and so on. So he's not hiding it. But it's an interesting question about the authenticity of his beliefs. So I've written at length about the Dark Triad, which is a personality trait, or rather a constellation of 3 different personality traits. So the Dark Triad, first you have narcissism, which is entitled self-importance. Then you have psychopathy, which is basically a callousness, a cynicism, disregard for other people. And then you have Machiavellianism, which is strategic exploitation and duplicity. And, those three traits, the core of these traits are antagonism, willingness to manipulate, relatively unfeeling, and also this kind of performative aspect where there's often a kind of a horrific void beneath people who have elevated dark triad traits. And there is no actual identity underlying it. They will shapeshift. They will behave in ways that will garner them approval, material rewards, social rewards, professional rewards, sexual rewards, and
political rewards.
Yeah, political rewards as well. And
so how could that we are correct, how could that manifest now that he's actually the mayor of the city and he's not just a candidate?
So generally, I would assume that most elected officials probably have some elevated levels of narcissism, but it's those other two traits that are more alarming. Psychopathy is often described as the darkest of the three dark triad traits because that often predicts interpersonal conflict and violence and criminality and that kind of thing. But how would this manifest itself in running a city? Well, I think very rapidly you'll find that once people acquire power, their coalitions start to fray. Because if you are a leader, you need to have strong alliances. You need to build trust, and if you are high on the dark triad, you can build coalitions temporarily if you have an end goal in mind. But often, once those people acquire power, the corruption starts to proliferate, and people will start to abandon ship. So we'll see what happens there. But one characteristic of the dark triad as well is that they will essentially adopt opinions and views that will make them look good, and this is often calculated and explicit. And I think this makes sense when you track Mamdani's evolution. He's a millennial, he's been online his whole life. You can see that he would post the kind of woke boilerplate nonsense 5 years ago, defund the police is a queer feminist issue, and all that kind of stuff. It was very, there was that picture of him with his gloved hand giving the Christopher Columbus statue the middle finger during the peak of the pandemic, and saying the caption was "tear it down." So he was very much in that vein of tear the statues down, very much in the kind of woke revolutionary mindset. And once he saw an opening to become the mayor, he pivoted toward more sort of left-wing populism, as you guys are saying, pivoting over to affordability and concentrating on affordability. And whenever he's pressed on his previous statements, his kind of Marxist and Marxist adjacent statements, he says, "Oh, I'm just focused on affordability." And then 5 minutes later, he'll say, "Oh, I'm going to shut down the gifted programs in the New York City high schools." And I'm thinking, okay, what does that have to do with affordability?
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right that you're going to see a shift in tone. And I don't think we have this video yet. So I apologize. I'm just going to read this. CNN, Van Jones last night says, "I think Mamdani we saw on the campaign trail, calmer, warmer, more embracing, wasn't present in that victory speech. He missed a chance to bring more people into the tent. His tone was sharp, almost yelling." And he says, "The warm, open, working class guy wasn't on stage tonight." And you saw that towards the end of his campaign where you started seeing a harsher tone when he thought he had it in the bag.
Right. Yeah, and he started to castigate people for, talking about his aunt after 9/11 and this kind of thing. He started to use guilt and manipulation again. You saw those traits surface.
Let's wrap it up in the stream here real quick. We'll be right back.